What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, the Forsaken Forgotten Futurist here, and we are back with episode 103 of the video game therapy series. I'm reading a new book, and it's not really one that I am, not my usual forte of book readings, but in the course of my, I don't know, I guess professional happenings, I generally ask people that I'm introduced to for any reason for book recommendations, just because I'm always interested to hear what kind of things people think are meaningful to read or what they get the most out of. And I've gotten a lot of the repeats of the classics, or occasionally something really stupid that I kind of wonder, like, what the fuck's wrong with this person if they would recommend this book. But I got recommended a book on it's called How to Change Your Mind, and it's ironic because the first thing that I would immediately respond to the title of that book and go, well, I'm immediately cautious whether or not this is going to change my mind or not. I kind of doubt it on some level. But the book is called How to Change Your Mind, and it's kind of a big book, but it's a lot about psychedelics, which isn't really something that I've never done them. I'm not really a big person that's big into drugs. So I suppose it's not really something I would generally read. And it's generally not a kind of recommendation you expect to get from somebody, is a book about drugs. But I think the guy who ended up recommending me this book was had started his own like mushroom company or something like that. I think it's something I have noticed that people that do psychedelics is they somehow find a way to not shut the fuck up about it for months, even perhaps perpetually. So I guess it's just one factor of the whole psychedelic experience, is to just never shut the fuck up about it. But anyway, the book is interesting. The history of it is interesting regardless, because there's a lot of I'll even say like politics involved with with psychedelics themselves as a drug. But I was less interested in that and more interested in the actual, I'll even say just like neurological, or kind of even perhaps philosophical, if I can be that vague, results of psychedelic experiences. And a lot of people have generally the response is like is profound, not in the same sense people do heroin, their life is derailed, but a lot of times they have people cite it as one of their big moments of their life. I know Steve Jobs famously said that doing LSD was like one or two of his top, like, in most influential experiences. And as I was curious why that would be the case. But the interesting connection that because I'm interested in thinking more about is the relationship between, I guess, these psychedelic trips, where, essentially for, I guess on a very low level, the mind's just kind of going crazy. Not crazy, but just is in a very different state. Between that and I guess forms of meditation. So, because I feel like a lot of the insights that people glean from these psychedelic experiences, sometimes they just become like these religious kooks, which is not really, they have these chakras and they start collecting bugs or whatever that represent different spirit animals of the moons or something. It's always just, it always seems a little bit ridiculous, especially for someone who is a bit more empirical in their musings, which I think I grew up very that way. I was very much somebody who was, trust the science. I was very much scientific. And I've even noticed throughout my ruminations on these videos over the last couple of years, I've become notably more mystic, or you can say spiritual in some sense, but more, I guess, skeptical of like really any human institutions, including science as well as language and other things, that naturally have a ton of ambiguity, is not the right word, but a ton of leniency in the way that they're applied and used, and sometimes how even cleverly they're deceiving us, despite seeming kind of foolproof. But I've noticed that I've become, again, more mystical as these videos have gone on. And part of that, I think, is due in sense to my adherence to meditation daily and consistently. And I don't really do it in the same, I don't have a I guess before I go into detail on the kind of parallel between these psychedelic trips and which I've never done, and like meditation, I suppose I should at least outline what my meditative philosophy is. So I think it's most similar to what Carl Jung called like active imagination, but more or less like I generally set a timer for 15 minutes and I lay down flat on like a soft surface where there's nothing like, because generally if it's like hardwood or something, you can kind of feel the hardwood on your head and it's kind of hard to like ignore that. But so generally I lay on my bed, I put a pillow beneath my hamstrings to kind of flatten my back out a little bit. And then I get each of my limbs in a position where there's nothing like, there's no tension. And I don't mean in the sense where there's nothing like hanging from them, but there's just no, they're not in a spot where it's like I'm not like landing on a finger, or I'm not pinching a knuckle, or I'm not like, my ankle's not rolled in some weird, so it's all very like neutral, kind of flat, just like the position you'd imagine like a dead body would be in, kind of on that, on the coroner's table. It was more or less how I am aiming to sit. And the first, I mean, I don't know exactly how long it takes, but the first, I'd say, 5 to 7 minutes, sometimes even 10 minutes of my like meditative practice is to basically just do waves from my feet up to my head, trying to just completely relax everything in my body, which is hard, but it's like you don't, sometimes people like flex and unflex, but I just try to like even just sink deeper, like imagine the pull of gravity increasing and kind of sinking and pulling your limb deeper and deeper into the surface. In this case, it's my bed. And I do this, one to just to relax my body, because I think it's good to kind of for that to be a component of meditation. I can't really. I think it's pretty hard to really get into like the mental, the cognition of meditation if you're just like standing up or you're bench pressing or something like that. So the complete relaxation I think is an important part just for the mental space of it too. But then after a while, like it's not that my body feels numb. It's more that just I'm just ignored like my body in that sense. I don't notice like sensations on my hands or feet or anything. I'm almost just like, I don't even know where my hands are. Like if you told me my hands were like the circulation was cut off from my arms, I wouldn't really know, because I just have kind of purposely forgotten about their existence. And that's kind of that first aim, is to kind of, for all my body parts to be forgotten. And then once that's the case, I let my mind wander. Literally, I don't have any agenda. I don't try to stick to any counting or anything like that. A lot of people do like breathing things where they're focusing on their breath. I've always struggled with that. It never really made much sense, because I would end up going in these I'd go in these weird rabbit holes, and it didn't really work for me, I guess. But yeah, I literally just let my mind go, and then I almost, most of the time, if I've done it well, so to speak, there's not really like winning and losing, I suppose. But I've completely forgotten about like, I guess, time as it exists at all. And there's times where this 15 minutes has felt like, not like years have gone by, but that they're like, I have no clue how much time has passed. Like for all I know, I could have slept through an alarm, or I could have fallen asleep. I don't know. Sometimes I'm sure I was not asleep. Other times I'm not really sure. And if it is sleeping, it's a very light sleep. I've been kind of disturbed through like noises and stuff outside, or train goes by or something like that. That has disturbed my meditative state before. So I don't know that it's like a deep sleep, because I've slept through that. If it is a sleep at all, but sometimes it's not sleeping. It's just almost like purposeful paralysis of the body, and then really just letting the mind kind of wander. And I don't really have a goal in mind most of the time. I just kind of let it do its thing, and then I come out of it, and generally I feel, I guess, more relaxed, or in some kind of subjective way better than I did before. So that's kind of my paradigm of meditation. I do that every day for about 15 minutes. And I'm not prescribing this any of this. I'm just explaining precisely what I do, such that when I draw parallels, when I say meditation or my meditation, that's what I'm referring to. I'm not referring to any particular breathing methodology. I'm sure the Tibetan monks and Buddhists all have their own way of doing it, and it's probably better than the way I'm doing it. I don't know. This is just the way I've done it, and the way I have gotten. I don't know. I feel better about doing it. I don't know. But anyway, a lot of the insights that people glean on these psychedelic experiences based off my interpretation of the book, of course, because they often say, well, you can't put languages make sense in this context or some sense, which is true. I do very as loudly acknowledge the limitation of language, and the fact that our paradigm of like scientific discovery is built on the premise of like language and common language and symbols that represent things. It is ultimately too then not like a foolproof paradigm. It's subjected to the whims of what I think these words mean, or even symbols or like interpretations of these symbols that mean certain things. And the symbols themselves are like, yes, we live in this world of symbols, but the symbols are mere representations of things that are inexact, right? So if we even measure, I suppose gravity is something that's kind of hard to say is inexact in some sense, but in a lot of ways, the representation of it just as a symbol is probably as about as exact as we get. But if that is like the pure upper bound, there still are like, I guess, impurities we would find in practicality of trying to use a symbol for something even as pure and as exact as gravity. So not to say that symbols are useless or all of it's useless, but I think it's common for people in the scientific community to mistake the symbol of something with that thing, right? Whereas the world, we've abstracted mathematics onto the world or from the world, and mathematics isn't inherent to like things. So like I said this before, but like we see two apples and we count two apples, but the universe doesn't have like this concept of two, right? This like two-ness is only something to humans. Like a dolphin or a monkey or even something, a rat or whatever, doesn't have a concept of like two-ness or things being of twos or fours of threes of these discrete numbers. It has no concept of that. These are abstractions that we've used, and they're very helpful and they're accurate in the sense that we can, we've never failed to say 2 plus 2 is not 4, but to say that like it's universally true that there's two, I think is a little I don't know, is a little arrogant of humans. But it seems to be the first, or I guess one big gleaning thing that people discover from psychedelic experiences is like this recognition of human arrogance, especially like hard scientists and empiricists that come out from these experiences often come out like much more mystical in nature, kind of how I've developed over the last few years. And there was some I guess, like neurochemical parallel between like Tibetan monks and Buddhists, like in meditative practice, and like what happens actually in their brain, again, from the shitty measurements that we've had from like fMRI machines, versus what people actually like experience on shrooms. Now, I would imagine that like a natural meditation or breathing technique or really any kind of like non-drug induced state is probably takes a lot longer. That's why it probably takes these Buddhists forever to actually like be able to like have these kind of strange or even like impressive physiological responses just to like cues they're giving themselves or cues they're giving their minds, even not even physiological, just like the cognitive results of these meditative practices. Whereas I guess in one sense, if you were trying to fast track it, you would just you would reduce it to say that that one serving of LSD is 20 years of meditation. But obviously people do it like you do it in different contexts, and the importance of setting is has not been understated in this book I've read, because this dude is basically like a 65-year-old boomer who wrote this book because he was like this lifelong psychiatrist, I'm not sure, but he'd been heard about all these psychedelics, and he's kind of just dismissed them as most like scientists do. Well, these are just drugs that people do to get high or whatever. And it's like, sure, it might help with like anxiety or addiction or anything like that, but they're just like these strange drugs. People that come out of these experiences often claim these like strange, like quasi-religious things or even spiritual. But so he was curious about them, and he had this deep dive. And of course, he comes out much more spiritual and mystic as before, and he's using, almost like Ralph Waldo Emerson-esque language to describe his experience, which most people are just like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Just give it to me in plain English. But part of, I guess, people's difficulty with his experience and trying to like explain to people who don't because we haven't done it or haven't, I mean, at least, I guess in my case, have meditated long enough, don't really understand what the hell any of this is, this like mind body dualism that they're experiencing, or this like kind of oneness or wholeness, or this like loss of the ability like to keep track of time. Whereas people want to look at that, and my first instinct, like as a scientist, you'd be like, well, there's certainly a rational explanation for this, but part of it is, and what I've belabored in these videos is that I think the overly rationalistic mindset is fundamentally not like universal. It might be like human-versal, meaning it's like it is apparently universal to all humans, but I guess to impose it on like the world itself and say like the universality to humans is like pure universality, I think is dangerous. Is flawed and dangerous. I think it's flawed in the sense that it's not like there's not an absolute truth to it, or at least there's like the arrogance of it being the human truth is the truth is a bit. I think it's kind of a stretch, even just not even logically, just scientifically, just to assume that there's nothing we haven't figured out yet or won't figure out, even using science. So I suppose the perennial question to be asking then to I guess scientists that refute any of this like otherness or this alternate states of consciousness, or just don't think that consciousness isn't this just simple, not even simple, but this just like maybe even grandiose calculation that goes on in our meat brains, and there isn't some kind of almost spiritual essence to our being. The question then kind of boils down to, more or less, like, do you think science will eventually explain everything? Like when I mean everything, I mean everything. Even like even our concept of infinity, I think, is not explainable in the sense that we don't like. How do you measure? Like infinity doesn't exist in our world, and like anything that you could point to and say, well, this is infinite. Like you can't like deterministically prove. You can like kind of mathematically show it using mathematical abstraction, but you couldn't like show me in an infinite distance, right? Because you wouldn't be able to prove that it's infinite. It's just it appears infinite to our minds. Or you'd write out an infinite number of digits of pi. You could keep writing them, but then like after each digit, I could say, well, what if there's one more? Or what if there's not one? What if it like you could keep plus oneing it. And using, I think this is where I think Gödel's theorem actually really strongly applies. Is I think that with this notion of like proving infinity, and I think while it exists in the sense where it like is a useful mathematical abstraction for us to glean insights from, I don't think it's like an absolute universal truth. In the sense, not saying I don't think infinity exists, but we don't know if it exists. And we won't really ever know if it exists because we can't really measure infinity scientifically. So unless there's some alternate way of like of really measuring it, and even that I would kind of argue would be, I guess, fundamentally impossible unless there's some alternate paradigm of science or of measurement. Even it's not even science can't measure it. So unless there's some alternate form which I just don't think humans even are too limited to be able to ever really comprehend that. I think the fact that like a limited mind cannot comprehend completely an infinite thing, an infinite anything, which is different from using infinity in calculation. I think this is much different. But on some level, it's like it's difficult to explain this to someone who's a pure empiricist, because it's not like I don't have a different. I was like, well, if it's not science, it explains everything. Then what is it? It's like, well, I don't have a what is it. I don't have like an alternative answer. The alternative answer is that there's not one. And it's like, well, we won't know. We have to keep like pushing science forward until we know for sure. It's like, well, I think part of what people are arguing when they, come out of their shroom trip with all this like weird spiritual jibber jabber is that there's some amount of like, I think we shouldn't err on the side of human arrogance. We should err on the side of human humility. And that's not to be a pure, I suppose, naturalist in some ways, to reject any notion of like humans doing human things. But I think we should at least respect kind of this upper bound on the capabilities of humans, and even the things that humans create, including like computers and technology, because there will only ever be like, evolutionary or kind of in some weird sense, like brainchild of limited beings. Like I don't think even a limited being like a human that produces a limited being like a computer could theoretically produce anything that is an unlimited or I guess an infinite thing, right? Like a finite thing producing a finite thing is not like any number of finite things cannot produce an infinity of anything. And I'm kind of just reducing humans there to finite creatures, and computers, doubly so. But in saying that, I suppose this God or this power or this, I guess, uh, whatever it is, however you want to phrase it, whatever, is is something inherently infinite, which we won't have full comprehension of. Which is all too kooky, I think, for people who are surrounded and use empirical things to support their like day-to-day life. Is they kind of need this like this pure kind of empiricist thinking with things, just because it, I guess, aids in a lot of their behavior. But I think what meditation does, and I suppose I can't vouch for this, but I guess psychedelics too. But what meditation does is I guess in times of deepest solitude, which meditation can be thought of in some sense of just like purposeful, deep solitude with oneself, is you kind of have to, a lot of self-rumination, you kind of begin to question a lot about yourself. There's a lot of like metacognition going on during meditation, whether you're, I guess, good at it or not, or I guess being good at it's even kind of a stupid measurement. But at some point or the other, it like the beings of time and existence and the end and the beginning of it all begin to just almost overwhelm you, and you kind of eventually just not give up in some sense. It's not a nihilistic conclusion. I think the conclusion is a lot more optimistic than that. It's almost just like this kind of cosmic appreciation, which is where I think you get this, I don't know, it's where this equanimous attitude kind of emerges from deep meditative experiences, and I suppose in some case psychedelic experiences. I get just based off this book I'm reading. I can't speak to that firsthand. But it's not a nihilistic thing, and I think a part of it is fear that, like, what if science really can't prove everything? Then like, what about all that? What about everything I've already invested into? I don't know, the world that exists now, the current paradigm of everything. And I don't exactly know what fear it is that you squash when you kind of are deep in, self-reflection for long enough to where you kind of become this like mystic person. But I can sort of confidently put forth that people that are pure empiricists would, I guess, begin to doubt themselves, or at least doubt certain paradigms had they spend, like, I suppose if they spend enough time, I guess, alone in their own thoughts, or I guess with the right, experience with a psychedelic. And again, I guess it's not like you can have an argument with these people and like try to convince them that, well, like, if you just spent 40 hours meditating, then you agree with me. It's like, I don't know that is really an answer that they'd accept either. I think there's just, I don't know, it's a certain, I guess, just like logical transcendence you accept when you've not kind of wrestled long enough with the immaterial, or wrestled long enough with your spirit or your mind or whatever that might be. But there's a certain like stoic kind of lack of power that you, I think, begin to appreciate if you spend a lot, enough time, self-ruminating and kind of mulling your own existence over your own head. And again, it isn't a nihilistic thing. It's almost the opposite. It's not energizing, I would say, but it certainly isn't depressing, at least in a absolute sense. There's certainly aspects of it that are depressing, especially if you're someone that is overly invested in, I guess, philosophical worldview that is empirical. And the other thing is it's not really because it's like this almost like kind of leave your hands off the wheel kind of conclusion. It's not fun, I suppose. That's why I say it's not like it's not energizing in the sense that there's not like, oh great, I could do research on, I could figure this out. It's like, I think part of it's like this understanding and this acceptance that, like, it's almost like, humans don't fuck with God stuff once you've kind of accepted that. And of course, I don't know, people have their own experiences on things like that, so I don't want to generalize too much. But I do. I just thought it was really interesting as I'm reading this anthropological history of psychedelics that meditation is so intertwined in the history of it. Not in the history of it, but in like the what it looks like and like what happens. And yeah, because even growing up as in any traditional religion, if you didn't grow up a Tibetan monk, you kind of look at the monks or just people that are bald and walk all day, and you walk all day around a Zen garden. And you're like, these people are morons. What are they doing? Like why? Like, do they really want to do this? Like, what about food or money? Like, you know what I mean? It's like what they don't really. You don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to like a Westerner in some sense. But I suppose like I get it. As someone that's spent enough, I totally get that. I'm not saying I would be a monk, but I totally understand like what it is that they're, what it is it's like attracting or drawing them, and it's not a complete absence of religion, and sometimes there is almost a strict or a heavy religious bend to it. It's like, well, there's this God, Buddha, and it's like I don't think there's a necessarily I don't think the names and things are important. I think even like the name of a God itself, God wouldn't name himself because like names are human things, right? Language is a human thing, so a God wouldn't even use like human language. So I think it's kind of again almost arrogant in some ways to say that like God would call himself God or call himself Buddha. I think they almost need to be talking about like the same entity, right? And just different, the manifestation of it has different names and different cultures and different, symbols and different things represent. And then all the symbolism and everything, the names are all human things. They're not things. The God itself isn't saying, well, I'm a tree. Like, no, I'm a human. It's like, you're not like, I think the human can see it however it wants. I don't think even, it or it's not even, it could be an it. It doesn't even have to be like a material thing. In fact, it could just be like a kind of this physical, this property of the universe could be this like kind of omnipotent force. Like we give gravity a name, but like gravity would name himself. It doesn't work like that. It's not like a being. We're kind of anthropomorphizing it. But they're all kind of, they're talking about the same thing. Aldous Huxley, who's the author of A Brave New World, which I finished reading earlier. But he's mentioned this book a lot. He apparently wrote a book called like The Perennial Philosophy, which was more or less kind of conjecturing that there was kind of this like spine, so to speak, or this like thing that joined all the religions of the world based off of like there's an underlying truth to it. But it's underlying truth in the sense that like it's all manifestations of the same underlying truth. And so it's not that like, I'm not saying, like astrologists, I fucking hate astrologists, mostly because of its like prescriptive nature or its descriptive nature in terms of like, oh, you're this person because of this moon or something. But I think Huxley, what he was trying to do in this book, which I haven't even read, but I think the gist of the purpose behind the book would be to try and like, I guess at least put the argument forth that it's all one thing, like Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad or whoever. I don't even know who these gods are, different religions, or like the 20 Greek gods are all kind of representing the same kind of inhuman, or not even like it's like a, I guess whatever the word is for like outer human. It's kind of everything. It's like omni-human thing, including humanity and all animals. It all includes everything. And while a lot of them include like these spiritual bends, like I think it's the spirituality of it's immaterial to what it's actually describing, which is like this omnipotent force. But anyway, I'll move on from the whole realm of like meditation and psychedelics. It's very fascinating that there is such I guess there's a line that you can draw between literally just like laying down and thinking kind of, or just letting your mind wander and taking LSD. Which again, from my, I guess my childhood exposure and was just like, it's drugs. Don't do drugs. LSD is a drug. You're going to turn out, you're going to cut your hands off and burn your eyes out or something like that. Which I'm definitely less scared of it as like a drug, like what I would be of meth or something. After reading the book and the history of it, because there is a lot of politics behind the history. But even so, I'm not like chomping at the bit to go run around and do psychedelics. I just don't know that it'd be. I don't know that it's even necessary. I think it's, again, you can achieve kind of the same effects through like deep and I guess intentional meditation, which I've kind of been doing already. Which is why I think I don't. A lot of these like I don't know, a lot of these like insights that people glean after doing, psychedelics aren't really that surprising to me. Where it's like I've kind of come to these conclusions, I suppose, already, and not from, and didn't have to do any drugs, which I guess is probably the better way to do it, right? If you don't have to. Not to say there wouldn't be other, like I haven't had hallucinations or something like, I haven't been hugged from God or whatever what people claim to have experienced during their trips. I've missed out on that, I suppose, but I've certainly had a lot of like, I guess, deep sessions where I've kind of totally forgotten about time. Almost, it's like it's just independent of time. I've kind of lost that, and then also just kind of contextualizing the self and where does me, my brain, my ego, where does this fit into like the larger scheme of humanity, the universe, like kind of even all conscious beings. Consciousness has been still a fascination of mine, just because of its even not even its political relevance, but its relevance to I think our lifetimes and how we look at quote unquote artificial intelligence, what I think is kind of an insulting term, both on multiple fronts, and I don't think there's a lot more ways that I think artificial intelligence is annoying, not in the sense that it's just like this big hype train, but yeah. So anyway, I'll move on to something else because it's probably a lot. I don't know, there's a lot more. Let's see. Yeah. So I was thinking about this kind of, I don't know, this inductive process. Thinking about, I guess, like rationalizing certain decisions. Like I've said, humans are kind of machines that can work to rationalize anything we want. Like what you're looking for, you will find. Or the task isn't always been psychological. Like there are many. I don't know. It's well known that humans are good at bullshitting themselves more than anything, more than even finding truth. They're good at convincing themselves of truths. Like their delusions are much stronger than the truths that they find. But so something I thought is an interesting argument, at least on some level, is natural things are good, which is a statement that like I would say I agree with. Like, I guess I don't even know what you would consider natural. Like, isn't technically everything kind of natural on some level? Then like at what point of human intervention do we call natural? Like, I think obviously people referring to natural and artificial or natural and synthetic, they're drawing the line at the human, right? Where the human intervenes. Like a lack of human intervention, no one says it's unnatural. It's like a tree just growing in the woods. But like a tree, getting cut down is unnatural because there's human intervention. But I think a tree being cut down by lightning is still natural because we didn't do it. So I think natural and artificial are like the level of human involvement. So I suppose, again, generally things with less human involvement, not that are good, but I guess generally are better than not. And I guess this immediately kind of throws a hair into the next parts of this kind of statement. The other half of this that results in the other, I guess, the full clause, is that greed or like, I guess, self-importance or like self-survival is natural. Like it's a natural like thing. So like when people say, well, humans are naturally selfish, we naturally gravitate towards protecting our own self-interests, which I wouldn't disagree with. I think humans are natural. I would say humans are, I guess the caveat to that would be that greed, like on behalf of our species, is natural. Like in terms of our species to survive is natural. But I think greed on the like individual level is unnatural. So I guess to to kind of, I guess, use an example, um, I suppose somebody like a male in a tribe way back, like prehistoric humans that were hunting, like it would be most greedy and best for the individual human if they found a deer. It's like say there are two people out hunting somewhere. The two people got separated and they were hunting. If they killed the deer, then to like the one guy just says "fuck you," takes the whole deer, kills the other guy, and then runs off with the deer. Like that would be most greedy for himself, but obviously not for like the whole tribe to survive. Like they obviously know that there's a certain amount of individual sacrifice, that might be greedily like pushing the existence of their entire species forward. But so it's greed for their species, but not necessarily greed for the individual. So like people fulfill different roles, not out of individual greed, but of greed for like humans existing. So I guess the leaps of logic here that I would be interested in trying to like to dissect is that natural things are good, greed is a natural thing, therefore being greedy is good. Which again my first inkling with any of this is that there's a lot of like natural and unnatural to things we'd have to pull apart. Like individual versus like special greed or greed on behalf of the species are again two different things we have to pull apart. And then like goodness in what sense would be the other like problem you have to pull apart. So I think it's because I've seen this. The reason I even brought this up was because I see this kind of line of reasoning a lot where it's like somebody does something that's like blatantly bad for other people. And they're like, well, people will always look out for their self-interest. And it's a natural thing. It's like a natural human desire to look out for your self-interest. And I mean, but I think the naturalist argument there dissolves a little bit in the sense that, nothing we remotely do has any kind of natural bearing. Like naturally, it's natural for us to like go hunt for stuff. Nobody's doing any of that anymore. And not to say that that's the whole reason why we can't, like everything should be unnatural. Therefore, we should just embrace, I guess, synthetic things to the nth degree or whatever. That's not really what I'm saying either. But I think it's a logical jump to just say that, well, because nothing's natural, we don't should do anything natural, or well, because it was natural for our prehistoric ancestors, it should be natural now. Which is again why it's like not. I don't necessarily think that's like a fair logical jump to make. I guess to put it that way. And the other thing with greed too is, again, I think the distinction that people kind of gloss over with this is that I don't know that even individual greed is a natural thing. I would say that greed on the basis of like your representative party. So I would say if like greed on behalf of your tribe or your family or your kinsmen is much more natural than like greed for yourself over your family. So I'd say like greed, if you're, to sell your kid or something like that, would be unnatural greed, for your own benefit, versus like, I guess protecting your family by killing a kid. Killing someone else's kid would be okay, in this kind of strange greed paradigm. Which again, none of it which I necessarily agree with that much. But again, I think people like think all of them like greed is greed no matter what. I think there's certainly different kinds of greed that matter. And because I felt contention with people putting voice word of like trying to defend people that are being greedy for themselves or even just for their own family, but at the expense of like yes, I understand that you might kill your neighbor's kid to protect your kid in the event of like, I don't know, some nuclear holocaust or something like that. But the difference is like how many other families' kids are you willing to kill for your kid? Like at some point it outweighs like the special greed, meaning like I would rather have our species survive than like saving my dumbass kid. I'd rather not kill 100,000 other kids just to save my kid. But I think people often don't. They're so far abstracted from like, I suppose their greedy actions that they don't. There's not any. They kind of make the assumption that they're only killing the one kid across the street, whereas they might be kind of causing, like I guess, catastrophic. There's a catastrophic act of greed versus just like a, I guess a somewhat benign kind of like understandable amount of greed. Like there's an understandable greed. Like again, if it's like, I guess two families fighting to the nuclear holocaust and like one family kills the other family, because they're battling or whatever. They both try to kill each other and one wins. There's not like, that's greed that I don't think most people would like. You would fault with on like some moral level, but I think greed, greed where it's like you're just bombing an entire neighborhood or something like that, or like I don't know, at some level it kind of outweighs the I don't know. There's some balance between I guess saving your species versus making individual sacrifice. It's like so kind of letting your bloodline die. I don't think like the bloodline is like to a T the most important thing for us to protect. Like I think on some level there are humans that might have let their individual family kind of dissipate or fall for the betterment of like us the entire bloodline of another two other or five other clans or something like that. I don't know if there's math involved too. Maybe there is like a ratio of some kind that is the greed ratio that really determines whether or not something someone will act in this natural sense. But I kind of reject the individual or the notion outright that like, well, being greedy is a natural thing. Looking after yourself is natural, and natural things are generally good, especially in an age where everything is synthetic. So therefore, like me being greedy is okay. I don't know that. Again, I think there's a lot of logical leaps there that people make with all the words that they're using and just the implications of that logic itself. So I don't even know why I put that down, but that's yeah. So I suppose a related thing to this subject, if you can call it that. And of course, I'm going to talk about money because I hate money, but it's always it's a fascinating thing for me to talk about just because it's so prevalent, so pervasive in everything that anybody does all the time. Like money is in every sense is being like if you try to go a day or a week without having something money related shoved in your face, like everything, first of all, everything costs money, so you have to spend and buy money to do anything. So you can't even like ignore it in that sense. And you can kind of check out, maybe not pay attention when you're buying stuff, which is or buying food or whatever you have to. What do you have to buy to survive? But even so, like every ad is all just like centered around money. So it's just kind of impossible to ignore, which is why I find myself talking about it so often, even though I kind of hate the way it's manifested itself into our culture, worldwide culture, not even just here in America. But the argument, similar to the greed argument, is like, well, there's nothing wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong with making money because you gotta make money to survive. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing really right about it either. And you can't just say that, well, money is good because it helps people stay alive, which again, I'm saying, wow, I mean, what money is good? Is drug money good? Is like blackmail money good? Like what money's good? And then like, well, I'm making money, therefore I'm doing a good thing. It's like, I don't know. Again, I think this kind of follows a similar trajectory where there's so many, like saying money is good as like a tautology is bullshit in my opinion. I don't think what money is good, whose money is good. Like there's definitely like kind of good and bad money. And just because there's nothing inherently wrong with making money, like on that extreme, I don't think there's anything inherently good about it either. Because I think I've fallen victim to the argument before being like, well, any kind of money making endeavor is bad, which for the most part is actually accurate a lot of the time. I think if you boil it all down and you're working in the year 2024 and not 1900 or something like that, generally it's like there's often not good moral ends that result in money being made. But even so, I kind of reject the idea that money itself is bad now. I don't want to take that stance on this because I know how stupid, how silly and impractical it is to be an absolutist in that regard. But I think it's just as silly, if not more so, to then kind of overcorrect and say, well, making money is then a good thing, and therefore it's like there's a certain amount of money after which it's no longer good. And I would say then any money after that is inherently bad. Like again, to that first point, but certainly like your first I guess 20K in some sense, like your ability to feed yourself is not an unethical amount of money, right? I think any amount of money that you need to literally just get the bare number of calories you need to not be dying of starvation is an ethical amount of money. That being said, there's a certain surplus over which I would say it's very difficult for you to justify why it is that this is this is money being made ethically. I don't know. So again, I think it's thinking in binary thinking with regard to something like that. I think is kind of a silly thing to boil it down to. But too often it happens where people are like, well, there's nothing wrong with making money. Like I understand that, but what money and how much? and how am I making this money? With the idea, with the example of like, killing the neighbor's kids. Well, it's like, I've got to feed my kids. It's like, well, how many of your neighbor's kids are you willing to kill to feed yours? Is it 2, 5, 10, 20? It's like if it's 20 kids and like versus one, I'm not saying we have to be utilitarian or like, but is your kid 20 times better really? It's like, I don't know. I think it's just a little grandiose to think that at some point it's like, well, I don't know. You can even be like a Bayesian thinker and just kind of assume that, well, law of averages, out of the 20, there's probably gonna be more than the one kid that I would do, but I don't know. Either way, I generally, a lot of these arguments boil down to be a little too binary for me, and is difficult to not get into arguments with people about it. But not that I spend any time arguing, but arguing with myself really. Yeah. So here we go. Let's move on to something else. Yeah, this has been interesting because I kind of felt this, not this emptiness to put it that way, but this like voidness of like really, I suppose, wanting something. Where I feel like, and maybe this has just happened gradually over the course of my maturation, but I found that there isn't. Some people have like these very profound and deep callings where they don't want something out of like greed or envy or lust or any other shallow reason why they'd want something. They want it for like its sake. And I don't know, again, I don't know whether these people are being honest with themselves or not. Like, it could be the case that these people are lying. So for example, I had a roommate that I lived with that is like, I kind of dug deep into him one night just with philosophical banters, and he was basically like, well, all I want to do is I want to fly this plane. I want to get the license. I want to fly this one plane. There's this one plane that I really want to fly. That's all I want to do. I'll do anything to fly this plane. And I guess the first end's like, really, just a plane? That's it? You're doing all of this because you want to fly a plane, like just this one plane. What happens after you fly a plane? You're just going to kill yourself? Is there why is it that powerful of like a drive for you? But the interesting part is it wasn't something based out of like lust, wasn't, this girl he wanted to bang because he's horny. It wasn't envy. It wasn't like he wanted to, his friend flew this plane or something like that. Or greed in a sense where he like wanted, like 5 houses or something like that. He just wanted to fly this one plane, which it's kind of it's not hurting anybody. He could easily have flown it. But on many levels, I just doubted that like he really, really wanted, like truly, if he was completely honest with himself, and he spent hours in it, like thousands of hours sitting alone in a room thinking to himself, would this be like truly still be his, like, I guess his life's goal, like what he really wants? And I guess some of it might be like, well, I suppose no, if you spend enough time thinking about it. So, the answer would be to like figure out something that you probably want or that you think you want at this time, and then don't think about it anymore. Therefore, you still want it when you can get it, So pick something attainable that you want and do it. And don't think too much about it, which is, I guess, is one practical and probably good solution to like the whole like wanting something. But of course, with my philosophical disposition, I have to like kind of question, well, why is it that I want this? Because is there something, is it, do I truly want this, or am I looking for something else? It's like, it's, not to be all Freudian, but it's like, well, is it something, is there some trauma in my childhood that causes me to want to fly this plane? It's like, I don't, probably not. The guy probably didn't get molested on the plane by his father. So I don't know why, again, this was fixated on this plane. But again, I guess who am I to judge that was truly his like, purpose in life, I suppose, was to go fly this plane. But I suppose I just haven't felt I won't say ever, I guess when I was a child, I guess I can't ruminate much on those thoughts, but I haven't recently ever felt any like truly like, I want this, I want to fly this plane, I don't care what it takes. Whereas I think some things you just want out of like, greed or lust or some like, I guess, very primal instinct, right? It's not like I don't want the house just because it's this like dream of mine. Even if the world were empty, I still want the house. I want the house because it's bigger than Dan's house, and fuck that guy. You know what I mean? Like that would be that'd be like a want that's out of greed. But truly just wanting something for its sake, I think is a rarer thing than people might actually believe, or that they might see. And I guess I'm kind of dismissing these like false wants. And so in the case of this plane, again, I think I would seriously doubt, like in his heart of hearts, again, if he spent thousands of hours and he did all the mushrooms in the world or whatever he did, I wouldn't care. If he took him out of all that and was like, yes, all I want to do is fly this plane. And I'm like, you know what? That's awesome, because I wish there was something that was that absolute calling to me that I wanted so bad, that wasn't just based off of some like, well, fuck this guy, I would do this just to spite somebody, because like spite, I think, is probably the only thing that really ever drives me to like want something, at least, at this current juncture. And it's like, well, it'd be funny, and out of spite, I'd kind of want to just to fuck with them. And even that is generally a pretty weak motivator. And I've noticed that because I don't really care. And I know that I don't actually want that. I'm just doing it out of spite. So it's not like I don't fool myself into thinking that a spiteful desire is a true desire of mine. But I think there is just some, I don't know, I'm envious of people that truly, truly want something, in itself, even if it is something that is trivial or, I don't know, is easy. Like some people just like want a girlfriend, they don't care. And I'm like, why do you want a girlfriend? They're like, well, it's like, it's so absolute of a truth to them that they're not able to even consider like what a world would be like without wanting a girlfriend. It's like, I don't know that desire is not this like cosmic force in me that's like compelling me to do any and everything to like fly this plane or get this girlfriend. I kind of doubt that it's, I don't know, true to that person. But again, if it is, I suppose, again, if you can delude yourself into it, I guess more power to you. Which I spoke about last time is like, I guess the power of delusion. So I don't know how I can get better at deluding myself into doing stuff, because I think that's a skill set that I would love to develop at some point, to be able to convince myself of something that or just to like, not even convince myself, just to like to accept something and not question it. You know what I mean? And not spend more time kind of flipping it over in my mind, or kind of reducing it, or analyzing it, and just saying, well, this is the most important thing right now, is to like, I don't know, cook the best burger possible. Like for a while, I'd probably spend 5 iterations cooking the burger. And then after a while, I'm like, dude, why am I cooking? Why do I want this best burger possible? And who's the best? Who's to say what the best is anyway? What the best burger I think is possible? Just have somebody smoke a joint, eat the burger. It's the best burger they ever had. That's like, I don't even know that it's even worth, or what am I doing really? How do I, that's an impossible thing. Like I want to make the best burger ever. To who and what? What do you call a burger? Like, what can I put on it? Right? Can I put mushrooms in it? I don't even know. It's like, it's impossible. But that's where my mind goes. I immediately want to kind of tear these things apart. Whereas some people are just like, I might ask them questions like that. Or what do you mean by best? And it's like, what do you mean the best? The best burger? It's like, I understand that, but like, on what criteria are you saying the best burger ever? Like, what do you mean? You can't just say, how are you so committed to like making the best burger ever when you can't even tell me what best is? Which is, I guess, where I get hung up a lot, where other people don't. So I think I need to get hung up on that more to be able to, I guess, get good at making burgers or whatever it is that I'd be, focused on doing. Obviously, making burgers would not be what, I guess I've already kind of, trivialized that for myself. But someone else that, was hell bent on making burgers or whatever else, or, the best company. What is the best company? The most, like, I don't even know. I guess there's more objective and less objective goals, but then why are those goals? Like, if you want to be the richest person on the planet, why? What are you going to do? Well, I can solve world hunger. Can you? And is that the only path you can think of, or the most? I don't even know. There's just a lot of. I'd always have questions for people that have these strange fixations on what their world and what their life needs to be, and I'm like, I don't know. I spend more time kind of analyzing and tearing apart those ideas than like committing to my own dumb fantasies of making big burgers or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, I'll wrap it up there. So this is a fucking stupid episode. So anyway, peace out. Thanks.